Welcome to the Car Sim and Race Driver Show, presented by Hugh Hattrick. Here at Bathurst in the Post, my very special guest, Basic Ollie, Rascal, Rabbit, Josh Martin. It's great to have you back on the show. Drive fast and try not to crash.
Good evening and welcome to the Car Sim and Race Driver Show, where we've got the biggest setup we've ever had in the history of the show, because we've got David Perel and Josh Martin. Good evening to you both.
Hey, how's everyone? Thanks for having me on the show, Hugh.
You're very welcome. Now, I got the two of you on the show because I know you're both the big men at the sim grid that makes all these things happen. And you've had some very big announcements recently. And I thought, who better but the two of you to go over these big new announcements of the championships that you've been doing with the sim grid and what you can offer all our keen sim racers. So who would like to start?
I think Josh is going to have to start.
All right, no pressure, huh? So the sim grid, since we last spoke here, is, it's been growing really well. We're now at just around 16 pounds of members in total across our Discord and website. A big player now in the industry, which is awesome. We recently announced our World Cup series, which a lot of people may have seen, bringing together the best of the sim racing industry in terms of teams and drivers, as well as, broadcasting being supported by the virtual competition organization, VCO. And we've also got $20,000 prize pool just to put the cherry on the cake. So, it's been going really well. Obviously, David's been working hard behind the scenes and we've been kind of helping him along the way with it. So it's been going really well. Yeah.
Now, didn't you say it was 16,000 people involved in the sim grid?
Yeah.
That's fantastic. I mean, that's kind of record growth. Because when you started early last year, I remember it was quite different, but it's really kind of blossomed through this time. So what do you think has been the secret of the success of the sim grid?
I mean, well, we started in June or July last year we took over a community called GZR from Michael Hamlet. But Michael Hamlet, who was running GZR, he just simply continued to run the sim grid. He's the community sort of operational guy, and Josh is the head of commercials and marketing and stuff. I think, honestly, the thing that I tell the team, at least, is we have to focus on sim races and we have to forget about the real racing drivers as much as possible. And just try our best to create the best production of sim racing possible. That goes from the sporting side all the way to broadcasting on YouTube. Every Monday when I meet with the guys, I'm always asking, does this look like the same quality as an F1 race? And if the answer is no, we have to keep pushing. So I think people are starting to appreciate that. I mean, for sure, stuff like the prize money helps, but we also have really, really cool tech. So for us, for the sim grid, it's the easiest place to sign up to. We have a daily racing platform where you can race every hour to practice.
Wow.
Stuff like that. So we're trying to always look at ways to make the life of a sim racer more pleasant, easier. I suppose it seems to be working at the moment.
Yeah. So what do you think it is that makes sim racing so appealing? Because it's very different to any other type of game, isn't it? I mean, you've got your kind of fighting games and all that kind of stuff and Grand Theft Autos, but sim racing, it tends to bring in a particular type of person, or someone who maybe likes cars as well as racing. But what do you think it is that with things like the Assetto Corsa competition and the games that you're running, what do you think that is that brings people to take part?
I mean, at the end of the day, these games feel real, they're immersive, and you get to race at tracks that you would only dream of in real life. And it just gives racing fans a place to try and experience something that is very, very hard to achieve in real life. To get to a racetrack and all that stuff, it's difficult, it's expensive. Sim racing is a bit more affordable, but I still think we haven't even scratched the surface of the audience potential. And you just have to compare it to other games like FIFA and Call of Duty and stuff to see that we still have a long way to go. And for sure, there's a lot of people who enjoy sim racing, but I think that we can still continue to find more and more people who haven't seen it yet and will hopefully come on board later. Hopefully through the SimGrid, but through other platforms as well.
Definitely. I think, what David said, just to kind of fall on the back of that is from a psychological aspect as well, sim racing presents a very unique opportunity in terms of the level of competition that's present, whereas in Call of Duty or FIFA, you've got intense periods of maybe 2-3 minutes and then that's it. In racing, whether it's real or virtual, you can be battling with someone for up to an hour, but you can also have, pit strategies to deal with or the weather to deal with. And, a lot of us are all adrenaline junkies that do this stuff. And I think anyone who is an adrenaline junkie would be drawn to sim racing. And really, sim racing presents that unique opportunity to tell those stories of that amazing battle I had, So it's, there's a lot of reasons why people are drawn to it, I think.
And I remember, this must be over a year ago now, actually, probably even 2 years ago. I was watching you, David, doing a live stream. And Josh, you were his engineer. And it made me beg of the question of when you're now doing the Coach Dave setups, have you taken inspiration from each other's ideas of how to set up the car, or how did that all come about?
Well, we Josh and I don't do the setups. Because we're not fast compared to like the ultimate aliens in ACC. We wanted to find for Coach Dave, in order for people to be willing to pay money for a setup, which before we did it was like a no-go. We needed legitimate people doing the setup. So we have a group of drivers and engineers, 4 drivers, 4 engineers. They work all day long, working on car setups. And those are the guys who essentially are creating the products that we sell. And the engineers, they have real life experience, and the drivers are pro sim racers. They're not real life drivers. I mean, I could swoop in there and give my recommendation, but that's coming from a place where I'm maybe half a second away from the ultimate pace. So the setup that I would recommend to them is not the right setup for what we're trying to achieve.
Yeah.
I think.
Sorry, go ahead. I suppose with that kind of setup, do both of you kind of jump on every so often and see what the setups are like to give it a go, and see what kind of direction that they're taking?
Yeah, I mean, like David said, the guys that are working at Coach Dave Academy, James Parker and the rest of the team, they are guys who are living and breathing this game. They know all the nuances, but also how to make something that can be accessible to anybody, So as much as David and I can jump in and have a play about with it and stuff, these guys are on another level when it comes to the technical knowledge. And I think that's, what really makes the Coach Dave Academy products so valuable is that it's not someone who's doing it in their part-time, and obviously there's nothing wrong with that, but it's people who are literally dedicating their passion and their interest in order to create setups for anybody so that they can at least be competitive.
Yeah. No, sorry, carry on.
No, Hugh, because I've been away, I haven't been at my sim for 3 months. So when I arrived home today, the first thing I did was turn on my sim, tried his new British GT tracks, and I was using the Coach Dave setups. So I made the smallest tweak to the dampers, 1 click, and for the rest of it, it seemed to work okay. And yeah, I mean, that's pretty much the aim with the setups is we don't want, well, there's people like me who don't necessarily have the time in the evening to just work on a setup before a race the next day. Sometimes you only have time for the race, and you don't want to spend time on your setup. So they're more a convenience thing. And that's why like the setups that we do are not at all about ultimate pace, like the fastest possible lap time. It's more about some form of usability and trying to find a setup which is more usable than what you get in the game. And like Forms is a good baseline where you can make your own modifications, but underlying is like good fundamentals from a real life engineer and a pro sim racer, I suppose.
Well, it's a fantastic offering to have, because I've finally got Assetto Corsa on this very machine that I'm using tonight, which is a laptop. And so I'm going to be connecting it to my big screen at home, so I can get it all sorted and actually start playing properly on the PC versions rather than PlayStation versions. And I wouldn't know where to start when it comes to getting a setup. So I'm going to be using some of your setups and buying the what you've got for some of the cars. I mainly do GT4 at the moment, but I'll try and do some GT3 as well, because it's great to be able to have a setup that actually works, because you think normally when you do a standard setup on the game, it's quite slow, or it's a good bit away of what you need. So no, it's a fantastic service and offering. that you're putting on. Now, just to kind of slightly change the subject slightly, now that you two have been working with each other for quite some time, what have you learned from each other?
Well, I've known Josh.
This will be good.
I've known Josh, I think, well, what was it? 2018, I think we met.
Yeah.
Josh I think we reached out via online or something, but we met in person at the Nürburgring during a sprint race that I was doing. And already then I could tell like Josh was really an impressive kid because he was still quite young then. But like entrepreneurial and stuff like that. And I told him then, I'm like, mate, one day when I start a company, you're going to work for it. So yeah, last year when I started Coach Dave, about 4 months or 5 months in, Josh came in at first as a contractor, now works full time. The cool thing is like, and it's Josh, it's also Michael and James. They're young guys under 30 years old, but they all know the sim racing world much more than I knew it. And I mean, like within the industry, like I knew sim racing from the point of view of a fan, someone who liked to drive sim games or simulators. I mean, whereas Josh is on the ground.
Oh, I think it's gone. Is it internet? Are you still there, Josh? Yep. Oh,
Yep.
It's coming back. There we are.
I'm back. Sorry.
You're back.
Sorry about that.
That's all right.
So, where did you lose me?
Just when you were saying that Josh had come on full time last summer.
Okay. So yeah, Josh came on full time, and the cool thing with Josh is he knows the sim world like intimately. He knows everything that's going on in like a lot of companies and is able to share vital information of like how to direct our competitions. He has a really good pulse on the industry. So that's the cool thing with having someone like Josh on board at the SimGrid. You need people in this. If you want to make a successful sim racing company, you need people from the sim racing world. And everyone at Coach Dave and the SimGrid comes from sim racing. We usually find everyone through our Discord community, to be honest.
That's brilliant. So, Josh, the same question to you. What have you learned from David?
Yeah, I mean, I think, for those of you who don't know, obviously David's got a very successful background in, technology and everything that he's achieved. And I'm sure that, if he wants to, he can go into that tonight. But, I've been lucky enough to be in the sim racing landscape for the past sort of 6 or 7 years in various forms. And David's kind of approached the industry with a very different outlook. He's, like he said at the start of the interview, it's, for racers by racers, but it's for sim racers by sim racers, And so for me, learning from him has been very much in terms of, making sure that we deliver a quality product because, I speak the language of sim racers and David does as well, but it's about finding that right blend. And, with Michael and James and the whole SimGrid team, we've been able to really put together a great product. And, if you look at the Coach Dave Academy setups, for example, it's not just that you buy a setup, there's a dedicated support forum where you can chat to people like James who know the game inside out and you can get that support and really looked after. And I think, I've learned a lot from David over the time, even from a design aspect, marketing, I've learned a lot from him. And like you say, he's definitely going to be leaving an imprint in the industry that's going to shape it moving forward. So.
Fantastic. Now, that's great. And one of the questions kind of following on from that, and I will come to the questions in the chat in a minute because we've got some very good questions that have been asked there. There seems to be things that you can do in a game that you can't do in real life. You see a lot of the time. I remember watching Kieran, the K25 racing, and when he was braking, he seemed to change down gear straight away before he'd even kind of taken the speed off. But somehow on the game, it kind of adjusts for that. Are there other kind of little things that you think you can do in a game that you can't do in real life?
Oh, for sure. There's a lot of techniques that you have to use as a sim racer, which would never work in real life. And like one of the things, the way that you drive a car in a simulator fast is you kind of drive it almost like a kart on the rear, like a rear dominated setup, if you will. So you back it in a lot and then try and get the car straightened up. If you did that in real life, you'd spin out or crash or so on. But what I've come to learn, especially during COVID times, is that, and I was guilty of this as well, is we spend too much time trying to compare a sim racer to a real racer and a real racer to a sim racer. But they're completely different disciplines. You can't compare a rally driver to a circuit driver, and we shouldn't be comparing circuit or real life drivers to sim races, because they stand on their own. And that's why, like I say to Josh and them, is as much as we can, let's emphasize sim races and not real races, because there's a lot of people in sim racing who don't actually, yeah, for sure they'd like to experience driving a real car, but they want to be the best sim racer. And that's different. That what you need to be fast in a sim is not what you need to be fast in real life. That's without question.
So we've got to concentrate on the sim racing. And that's because I think that's a question I've had quite a lot, is that people say, how are the people doing the really fast times? And then they say, well, the last half a second is almost like little glitches or little things that you do that you can do in the game that you can't do in real life. So if you follow the video,
you have to exploit the game, and that's true for any game you play. It doesn't have to be a simulator. I mean, you can drive a simulator as if it's real. That's, I believe, I used to be a really fast sim racer like 10 years ago, but as I've spent more time in real cars, I've gotten slower in sim racing because I have preconceived notions of how a car should be driven, and it's not fast enough for the sim. So,
no, that's really good to know. Some fantastic detail there as to how to get quicker and how the two types of racing are different, yet similar in different ways. But now I'll go to one of the questions that we have here from somebody called But Dino. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it, but hopefully I haven't insulted anybody. And he says here, I'd love to know how ABS works, like IRL GT3 versus Assetto Corsa competition, for instance. In Assetto Corsa competition, it seems that brake output of 100% is faster as compared to, say, iRacing, where you rarely want to hit 100%. And he goes on to say, is the ABS system in real GT cars good enough that you can basically mash the pedal and let the computers figure it out? Or is it something where a finer touch is required?
So in real life, we don't have 100% braking. It's measured on bar pressure. And the first 1/10 of a second that you push that pedal, you have to push it through the floor as hard as you can, because that's when you get your maximum sort of bite efficiency without the tire locking. Now, after that little, like that punch on the brake, you can start to bleed it off so that you don't activate the ABS too much. But this is the thing, like, people think that traction control and ABS are driver aids, but they enhance the performance of the car. With the ABS, you can brake later. You can brake into the corner without locking the tires and so on. Without ABS, you have to brake a little bit earlier and brake in a straight line. You have to release the brake before you turn in. So it's a very different technique. Both are difficult to be fast. But iRacing, which is, I think, mentioned in this comment, in my opinion, has the least realistic experience of all the simulators when it comes to braking. In iRacing, you have to be way too gentle. And if you're too aggressive, especially on the release of the pedal, you spin out. That doesn't happen in real life. Otherwise, you'd see a lot more people spinning out. So especially with ABS, we brake as hard as we possibly can in the first 1/10 to 2/10 of a second, and then bleed off the brake from there. But if you've got a strong left leg, you probably can benefit in certain cars. Now, it depends. For example, in the Ferrari, if you go over 100 bar pressure, you're no longer, it's not necessary, because up to 100 bar pressure is your maximum braking efficiency. Still, to get to 100 bar pressure, you have to push the pedal pretty hard. But if you go over that, you're not just wasting your own energy, because at that point, the ABS has already taken over. So if you're braking at 140 bar pressure, you might as well just brake at 95 and sort of relax a bit and save yourself for the rest of the race.
No, that's good to know. And how about you, Josh? Because you're a real, I remember watching you in your GT3 racing, and you were phenomenal at your starts. You can race with, when especially, I mean, we were racing at the Nürburgring GP circuit, and it was wet and dark, and it looked dismal for racing conditions, absolutely awful racing conditions. But you were racing your way through the field. How do you find that, is there a key to getting a good start in GT3 racing, especially on sims, and making up places?
It's a good question. I mean, from a technical aspect, David's probably the better one to answer on that front. But I think in the sim, the benefit that we have is we can practice starts 100 times over with very little cost, whether that's mental resource or financial. So For that championship specifically, I was working quite closely with Will Daniels, who does a lot of real world engineer stuff, and he's been on the show, as you know. And it was just about making sure that the setup was sent to get that compromise of being efficient but not wasting resource. And it's hard to say if there's no magic key that'll help. All I can say is just keep practicing, and it doesn't even have to be on ACC. Practice in a mental reaction test. Just get used to getting that button pressed as quickly as possible. And then as long as your throttle application is consistent, the TC will kick in and it'll support the car as it goes through the acceleration phase. That's all I can really suggest. I don't know if David's got anything to add on that, but
yeah, with simulators, you have the benefit of being able to practice every element of your race. Mm-hmm. And one of those things that you can do is you can crank up the AI in single player mode to maximum difficulty, and then practice your starts from different positions on the grid and come up with set pieces for where to position the car at the start, set pieces for overtaking and how to manipulate the cars around you to pull off an overtaking maneuver. So I encourage that. It's with my guys from Coach Dave Academy. I say, look, it's all fair and well that you're optimizing the perfect lap, but how much time have you spent on optimizing your in lap? How much time have you spent optimizing your start? Because we have the benefit of being able to practice those things in a sim. So, come up with, try a start from third place, try a start from last place, try a start from the middle of the pack, and see which racing lines work for each of those starting positions. Because oftentimes you can carry that over to the actual sim race itself. If you have a certain line that you've chosen outside of turn 1, inside of turn 2, and so on.
Yeah. What's your kind of least favorite starting position out of interest? If you're in a big race, like a real race, I know you're going to say you're going to be last, but do you think it's maybe sometimes more dangerous starting mid-pack than actually starting last because everyone's in the thick of the action?
Yeah, oftentimes in an endurance race, if you had a bad qualifying, you rather start last sometimes because you can get through the accidents that will happen mid-pack if you're paying attention, and then from there you can really start to push and overtake cars cleanly. Whereas if you're in the mid-pack, you just never know what's going to happen. Oftentimes you're unsighted. If you're racing in a Ferrari and there's a BMW M6 in front of you, you can't see anything except the rear of that BMW M6. So if someone in front of him crashes, oftentimes you only find out after the M6 has moved out the way, and it's not too late, but it becomes dangerous. So I'm not saying that you intentionally want to qualify last, but sometimes, like Spa 24, I rather start last than starting 35th out of 70 cars, because that start is scary. It's scary. And you rather just spend the time slowly getting your way through the field, which is possible.
Yeah. Now, I have a quick question for you, because I was playing this the other night on a GT3 race on a Assetto Corsa, and it was great fun. It was at Mugello, however they pronounce it in Italy, and I found it very tricky coming around the first corner, and because everyone seemed to be going off. It seems like the first corner draws you in, so you brake quite a bit, and then as you go through the second part of the corner, that's when you ended up spinning off. Is there an answer as to why that was happening? Because it seems to be, because it was in a Ferrari GT3 car, I think it was, but everyone was spinning off, whether it be Porsches, Lamborghinis. Is it balance issue, or are we just going too fast?
I think you're going too fast. If you're having issues at the exit of a corner, it means you've got on the power too early before the car's finished turning. So if the corner's going that way and you get on the power somewhere before you've gotten around the corner, you're going to drive this way. Yeah. And then you're going to add a lot of steering lock, and eventually the car's just going to snap. Right. And turn 1 at Mugello, you have to stay really, really tight, because the priority is actually turn 2 and 3. So compromise is key at that track. Compromising the exit of one turn to get better approach to the next turn. This is the secret to Mugello.
That's the thing. It was quite a funny race. It was the first one I'd ever done in GT3 on a Assetto Corsa, and I found out that people were spinning and they had left their cars facing the wrong way at the exit of turn 1. They must have abandoned ship, so it was kind of, everyone was crashing into them on lap after lap. It was great fun, though. I have to say it was a good fun, and I'm really enjoying it. But what do you find? First of all, I'll ask Josh. What are your favourite tracks on a Assetto Corsa competition?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of racing, Nürburgring's probably going to be up there at my favorite. But I think, coming back to your points about Mugello and even other circuits like Barcelona, every circuit can teach you something. Mugello is a great circuit for learning patience and compromise. The same with Monza, being able to let go of a little bit at the start of the corner to then get that gain and that clean run out the corners is hugely important. I mean, Donington's always a good bit of fun as well. I think any circuit that's kind of got mid-speed technical corners where you have to get that balance of the car right is always really rewarding and often produces quite good racecraft. So that's kind of my preferences.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic. And I'll go on to you, David. What are your favourite tracks that you like to race at?
Kyalami, Suzuka. Imola is my favorite in real life and in the game as well. I love the flow of Imola. I love how aggressive you have to be on the curbs. It requires a lot of precision. There's no track in the world like Imola. Honestly, it's just, I think it's twice as good as my next favorite. But yeah, that's it.
Oh, it's fantastic. It's do you like the Imola that was pre-1994 when you had the proper Tamburello corner, which was that incredibly fast long left-hand bend, and it'd been quite a magnificent corner for many years? Would you prefer to have that?
I think it's better now. I think it's better now with the chicanes.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have to attack the chicanes so hard. Previously, it was probably an easy flat corner in a Formula One. In modern days, would probably also be almost easy flat.
Yeah.
Whereas now, there's a lot more going on. You have to compromise the entry. The second part of the chicane is flat if you get it right. So I think it's more rewarding to a driver now. And when Formula One was there this last year, the comments from the drivers were like, this track is incredible. Terrible to race at, no question, but incredible to drive.
I think it's like Monza, isn't it, in that way that it's got the history. It's got incredible motor racing history right the way through the decades, when they've had amazing races and the historical events happen there. So it carries you. But no, it's good to know. Well, I'll get to some of the questions. Now, we've got somebody called Aleric Ulti Onslin. Question for Josh. I do apologise if I pronounced that incorrectly. Question for Josh. Since he's from an open wheel background in sim racing, and since he's doing more GT now, what's the thing you miss most from open wheel racing?
I think the thing I miss the most is probably the one thing I'm actually most grateful for, which is that the fundamentals of driving a GT car are very different to driving an open wheel. And when I did a lot of driver practice, even with Ulti and Aleric, I should say, when you come out of a corner, you need to be on that throttle and you need to be on it, smoothing consistently. And it's all about just getting up to 100%. In open wheel cars, you can flick the back end out a bit more. I'm a driver who prefers oversteer, so I kind of prefer to lean on the rear of the car than the front. Whereas in GT, I don't think you have as much of a luxury with the variation in that sense. So I think for me, being able to kind of just understand vehicle dynamics is always beneficial. And also looking after your tires is where you can get away with it a bit more with an open wheeler. When it goes off the cliff, I think it's more punishing, but being able to learn those phases and the tire degradation is always beneficial in a GT car. So,
yeah. No, that's fantastic. And I'll go on to a quick question also from Alert. This time it's for Dave. On what
I don't know the answer.
Neither do I. But
Ulti is one of my test drivers. He knows I'm a huge Star Wars fan, but I haven't watched Clone Wars since I think it came out. But it is on my list, Ulti, because the Mandalorian is based a lot on Clone Wars. Same producer, so I need to go back and into the history books there. Sorry, bro.
That's the thing. Now, we've got a great question from Gary Gilmore. And he says, on Gran Turismo Sport, the Lewis Hamilton time trial challenge, do you think he was holding back?
I would say probably not.
The funny thing is, the tracks where he didn't hold back, it took people ages to beat those times. The best Gran Turismo drivers in the world struggled to beat his Willow Springs time. The trouble is, Gran Turismo went to him and said, we need you to set a lap time at these 20 tracks. And Lewis is like, dude, I don't have that much time. So they probably said to him, okay, you got to come to the studio or we'll send you some stuff. And this is homework for you. Now, if someone told me that, as even no matter how much you're paying me, I'm not going to put 100% into it because there's no competition. So I think Lewis, he probably just did his best. He just focused on doing some clean laps, which Josh and I can attest to. When someone says, "Can you record a clean lap?" It's like, oh god,
it goes out the window.
Yeah, it's clear to me that when he puts in the effort, he can smoke anyone. But I think that Hamilton's one of the fastest drivers in history. I think he's the best, one of the best of all time. If you gave him enough time in Gran Turismo, where there was a competition element and he actually cared as much as a sim racer, I don't think you'd touch him, actually.
Yeah. Well, he used to play a lot of games, didn't he, when he was growing up? A lot of racing games, and I think that's fun. When you start at a young age, it just keeps going and keeps going. I've only ever managed to beat his one, or by a fraction, at Monza. That's the only one I could do. I was about 8/10 off his one at Willow Springs, and I gave up after a while on the other ones. But
the Willow Springs one is, I don't think I've beaten it actually.
No, they are good, but it's great fun. Now, going back to Gran Turismo Sport, because I remember the first time I interviewed you, David, and you were very much into GT Sport and saying that was the game to race for young sim racers and people wanting to get into it. Are you still in the same mind that 90 minutes or 3 races on Gran Turismo Sport is enough, and that's the game to play?
Yeah, I think so. I think in order to really get good at a sim, you need some form of discipline. In my case, it's practicing for 90 minutes, but having some kind of structure to that practice, not just doing mindless laps. I think it's always good to warm up on a baseline racetrack and car combination, so you know where you are that day in terms of like your mental, like are you on your lap record pace, or are you like half a second off? So it's always worth knowing that. It depends. I mean, the cool thing about Gran Turismo, at least, is it's the cheapest one of all modern sims, if you will. I know people say Gran Turismo isn't a sim, but whatever. It's still the cheapest one to get going in. To get going in ACC, I literally had to do a crowdfunding initiative with Patreon to be able to afford the PC. And if it wasn't for Thrustmaster and so on, it would have taken me even longer, because Thrustmaster sponsored me and they were able to give me the wheel and pedals to get going. So not a cheap endeavor if you want to go real sim racing, if you will. So Gran Turismo to me is a nice onboarding into the sim racing world, and that's what I care about, because I want sim racing to be as accessible as possible to people.
Yeah. I know that we earlier in the show, but before that, in the kind of build up to the start of the show, you were kind of saying how would it be possible to make kind of sim racing equipment slightly cheaper and more accessible? What would make that happen? What do you think would be a good way of kind of allowing or making that happen?
Well, first of all, we need rigs that are easy to access. Playseat do a good job, but Playseat, in my opinion, are the only ones so far who have created a rig under $500, which is relatively sturdy, relatively easy to unpack. That's one step. We have the Logitech and Thrustmaster wheels, which are at an affordable rate, but maybe we could go even lower than that. I don't know. I don't produce those kinds of things. But the biggest issue for people who want to get into sim racing is that it's not cheap. You're going to be in for $1,000 at least, just to get a basic rig up and running. So I think that the aim has to be, how could you get a whole setup up and running for under $500? And that's going to be a huge challenge, but someone's going to pull that off. And at the moment, you don't just buy a sim rig and it just arrives and there you are, you're rolling. You have to buy the chassis, you have to find a seat, all different websites. You have to find the wheels and pedals. That requires a lot of Googling, a lot of like knowledge-based search, a lot of recommendations. It would be really cool if there was like one of these companies had, here is the startup rig to try sim racing. If you enjoy it, you can upgrade. Boom. But if you just want to get started, if you just want to pretend that you Lewis Hamilton for less than $500, this is the one to have.
Yeah.
It doesn't exist at the moment. It really doesn't.
Yeah, because it cost me over £300 to get mine, and that was just for the play seat challenge and the G29 pedals and steering wheel, which I have to say has been pretty reliable overall and a good setup. But I'm desperate to try things like the V-Rig or the Track Racer. Obviously, they're a bit more expensive, but I think they would be. What would be your ideal setup? First of all, to Josh, if you could have a kind of no expense spared.
He's got it. It's right behind it.
I was going to say, full disclosure here, yeah, with the play seat and Thrustmaster backing, of course, it's going to be Thrustmaster products or a play seat rig. So yeah, I mean, I'm relatively biased in this, but I think just quickly to touch upon the fact that David was making is that you need a disposable income to do sim racing at the moment, and it's a huge barrier to entry. And we at the Sim Grid, we run a More Female Racers series, which is an awesome initiative at getting women into motorsport and esports. And even there were stories of people borrowing their friends, their dads, their brothers' rig to get involved, and they shouldn't have to do that, regardless whether they're male or female. So I think Gran Turismo has done a great thing in terms of being able to captivate the mass market, and it's for the rest of the industry to kind of react to that and provide that quality racing experience at a reduced price. So I know that's slightly off topic, but yeah, in terms of my ideal setup would be Thrustmaster for the play seat.
You're doing the sponsors very well indeed. That's fantastic. Now I'll come to the questions here again from Alec LT Onslin. Do you guys think there is a reason why a small fraction of the whole sim racing community focuses on rallying compared to track racing?
I mean, it's the same in real life. Rallying is a smaller sport, I suppose, compared to circuit racing. Rallying's fun, but okay, honestly, is there a rally game out there at the moment that truly feels like rally? Like, I feel like the exploits in rally games is much more than the exploits in circuit racing, from my experience. But I mean, trust me, I love playing dirt rally.
Great fun.
Yeah.
So Josh, you were doing a rally quite recently. I know I saw you did a live stream. What is it that draws you to games like dirt rallying?
Yeah, I mean, in my personal opinion, I think rally drivers are probably the most talented drivers out there compared to circuit or other drivers. And that's not to speak bad of any circuit driver, but I think, watching, Colin McRae's a perfect example. He was able to do stuff that I could only dream of. And I was lucky enough to watch, David and John Armstrong. They did a Thrustmaster challenge together where they did, ACC and then dirt rally. And even there, it was still engaging to watch. I think, the lure of dirt racing is that you have to be so precise every single time, and you have to be confident and committed to every move that you make, whether it's braking or accelerating. And I think that's maybe part of why it's so niche, is because it's so punishing. But for those, maybe that's the reward. So that's kind of why I see it that way.
Yeah. And David, I was going to say, do you ever fancy doing a proper rally, like a real rally? Has it ever tempted you to try something like that?
Yes and no. Yes, because it looks amazing, but I don't think I have the skills to drive like those guys drive, truly. What rally drivers are able to do, and like their lack of fear, is just insane. I mean, I've raced at the Nordschleife, and I knew where the track was going, and I was scared. And these guys drive flat out on roads that they don't know. And if they make a mistake on the exit, they hit a tree. I hit a barrier, and I was scared of the barrier. They hit trees. So you have to be born from a different planet to be able to be quick in rally. So I have driven a rally car. I drove an R5 spec. It was really fun. I did like maybe 10 or 20 minutes or two 20-minute sessions. It wasn't enough. But luckily for me, I didn't get the rally bug, which is apparently very contagious.
No, that sounds fantastic. But I was going to say, because both of you have got lots of experience with your gaming and real racing, what do you think is coming in terms of new games? Because obviously I know we've got Gran Turismo 7 eventually coming, maybe some point next year. But because you're very much into Assetto Corsa, and the original Assetto Corsa game's been out for a long time now. But do you think they will upgrade it and we'll start to see a kind of revamped version? And what kind of things do you think they might put in it?
There you go, David.
Oh, okay. Well, there was during the the recent 505 Games earnings call. 505 Games own Kunos. They mentioned that Kunos is working on a new version of Assetto Corsa. So I'm pretty sure that all the physics and stuff that they've learned from Assetto Corsa Competizione will be integrated into a new game at some point.
Yeah.
I just hope that Competizione will still has a lifespan beyond this year. So I hope that they add the new tracks that are coming in real life, Magny-Cours and Valencia.
Yeah.
Maybe they'll add the GT2 cars. I don't know. But outside of that, I mean, I think that we're lacking a bit in the simulator department in terms of modern simulators. Project Cars 3 turned out to be an arcade game for iPhone. Race Room, it's cool, but it's still built in old technology. The graphics and so on could definitely do with a revamp. The physics are a bit older school. iRacing does its thing. I'm not a massive fan. I've never have been of iRacing, but it's still by far the most popular sim racing platform. But it's iRacing versus ACC at the moment. Those are the only two modern racing platforms. We need a third one, in my opinion. AMS2 tried to do something, but I think they made a mistake trying to base it off the Project Cars physics engine, Project Cars 2, because the Project Cars 2 physics engine wasn't necessarily the most realistic. What would be cool, though, is if someone took AC, which has a huge modding community, and built, I don't know, a new game out of that using the developer's license. That would be cool to see, because the AC1 still has pretty good physics. But it would be nice to see someone like focus in on a particular kind of car, which isn't GT, like an LMP car or Formula car, and create a new game out of that using the original AC technology with some modifications or upgrades, if you will, to the physics. That would be cool.
Yeah. I mean, I have to say, there's no doubt from playing. I mean, I was brought up on Gran Turismo. That was the game I played right the way from PlayStation 1, right the way on. As soon as it was available, I always got my copy. But then getting into Assetto Corsa is just a different. For me, it's breathed life back into sim racing, because I was so much on GT Sport that I got quite bored of Gran Turismo. And then I think when they, all the kind of things with the penalties and all the stuff that was going on, it seemed like it was just a free for all. And that's actually starting another question from that. With the SimGrid, how do you avoid the kind of problems that they're having with Gran Turismo and people just crashing into each other, and being quite reckless, and stewarding a good race to make sure that it's fair and obviously maintains its appeal to drivers?
You're never going to fix it, because it's humans. Humans are playing these games, and it's not just Gran Turismo. It's in every single ACC race in the world. You're going to get someone who's going to say, this community can't drive. It's like, well, I've seen the biggest races in ACC in the world take part, and the midfield is chaos. And the same thing happens in daily racing. The midfield is chaos. So in order to fix that problem, you're going to have to change human behavior, human nature. And there's always going to be a mixture of people and characters who want to try and win it in the first corner, and those who want to try and take it a bit easier, those who want to learn, those who want to develop their skill set. You're mixing all of these people into a race where they start the race 1 meter apart. It's going to be an accident. I mean, today we had I don't even know why Michael decided to do this, but anyway, we had this big grid race with 70 cars at Spa, mixed GT3s, GT4s, Cup cars, the whole deal. And our photographer just sent a photo about 15 minutes ago of the start, and it's complete chaos.
That sounds like something else, but 70 cars at Spa. I mean, that we think Gran Turismo is bad, but that is the formula for incredible chaos, wouldn't it? But that's quite the thing. But I suppose on the Assetto Corsa competition as well, if you hit somebody, you get a real result in terms of you feel the damage and it ruins your race, or especially if it's on purpose. Whenever most people, when they play Assetto Corsa, they're not going to try and take you out on purpose, because they realize it will destroy the race. And I think that's a different approach, because while in Gran Turismo you can hit somebody and not really have any major issue. In fact, sometimes you can really benefit from doing it. And I suppose it's the physics of the Assetto Corsa game then has obviously been slightly better designed. So because always the cars seem a lot heavier, and if you hit somebody, you end up spinning off rather than the other person. In the most part, whenever it's happened to me, if I've gone too quick on the first lap and hit the curbs and gone off. But so do you think there's maybe a slightly better strategy with Assetto Corsa compared to GT Sport?
Josh, go for it.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think, this all stems back to the basic that David was saying, in terms of human behavior is not going to change. So what you can do, though, is you can give the users the tools to make it a better experience. And that's, the sim grid, what we've been working really hard on behind the scenes. And, whether it's our main series races, which are live stewarded by people who have real stewarding experience and sim experience, but also, giving them a stewarding and appeal process so that they can understand and learn from their mistakes, and make that kind of behavior not acceptable. And, like you say, the contact physics model of ACCs is pretty good, I would say. I've got quite a bit of experience into hitting people and being hit, so I can say it's good. But I think in order to kind of get rid of that behavior, you just have to make it as not enticing as possible. And ACC, because of licensing issues, doesn't have parts flying off the cars and stuff. But even that at a fundamental level helps, because people don't see the attraction of wiping out a field because they'll get to see tires and bodywork go everywhere. So I think the landscape's changing, and the technology that we're putting in the sim grid is going to help shift that.
Fantastic. No, that's great. A quick question from Loopy Racing for David. Do you still play GT Sport?
I haven't played anything for 3 months. I've been away from the sim. Before I left, I was still coaching on GT Sport. I just, I'll be honest, I got a bit bored of the daily races. I still love Gran Turismo. I have a PlayStation 5 just because of Gran Turismo 7, and then obviously, inevitably, they delayed it. So I'm really, 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 really looking forward to Gran Turismo 7. I hope it's not more of the same. I hope they make some small tweaks to the physics. I hope we have some of the old, like the classic tracks, Apricot Hill, Trial Mountain.
Yeah.
Because Gran Turismo unquestionably make the best fantasy tracks out of any game developer in the history of racing games. And I still love Gran Turismo. But I'm a bit bored of GT Sport. That's all.
I think that has affected quite a few people in the same way, isn't it? I think it's the 3 or 4 years that it's been out, it's done incredibly well, but this last 6 months it seems to be a bit of a drag. I think just with everyone's got used to the daily races, and we're hoping for something new to help spice it up a bit and help it to compete on a new level.
Yeah.
And I suppose Fat Furby, one of our Australian friends, has said the problem is we all have a different idea of what racing is. And some people think that bombing and rubbing is racing, or a Assetto Corsa competition for the win. So I suppose people have different attitudes. As you say, they'll dive bomb in some races, but not maybe in others. Now let's get on to the real racing as well. David, you were racing in the Asian Le Mans series and had some fantastic results there. What was it? Tell the viewers what's been happening in the early part of the year.
So this year, to kick off the year, was the Asian Le Mans series, which didn't take part in Asia because of COVID. Took part in Dubai and Abu Dhabi. Really cool format, though. We had 2 races per weekend for 2 weeks. So 4 races in total. 2 were in Dubai, 2 were in Abu Dhabi. And as a result of this compressed format, more affordable travel expenses for teams, because Asian Le Mans usually requires a lot of travel from Thailand, Japan, China, and Malaysia. This was all done at close proximity to each other. We had a massive grid of GT cars, 19 GT Pro-Ams, and I think 3 or 4 GT Ams, which brought the grid to 22 or 23 cars. And really competitive. Really, really cool to see so many GT cars in the same class on a grid. And I raced with Rinaldi Racing in the Ferrari. We had a really solid lineup. Rino Mastronardi was our bronze driver. I was the silver driver. And we had a factory Ferrari driver, Davide Rigon, as our pro. And it's cool because Rigon, he's a Formula One. He's the Ferrari F1 sim test driver. He drives in the real Formula One simulator I think 3 or 4 days a week. So
Wow.
and he interacts with the F1 drivers. In fact, when Alonso had his accident during the time that we were there, Rigon called him. I'm sitting right there, and he's like, "Oh, let me just quickly call Alonso," and it's like he's got him on speed dial. So that was really cool. I mean, I've been friends with Rigon for a while, but we got to spend 2 weeks together, and I got to grill him with a lot of questions about racing and stuff. And we got on really well. We had a really good engineer, our engineer Roberto. He's responsible for developing and creating the 488 GT3. So who better to engineer the car than the guy who made it?
Wow.
And yeah, we could have won the championship in my opinion, but the Asian Le Mans format it's heavily reliant on strategy. So in the first race, we missed out on strategy, so we finished 8th. The second race, we started last, 19th, for technical reasons, and we ended up 2nd. So that was, for me, my best race, because in my stint, I went from 19th to 3rd place. So that was really cool.
Yeah.
Especially because when I arrived in Dubai, I was struggling to learn the track, like to the level that was expected of me. So that was it was cool to finally get a decent result there. And then in the 3rd race in Abu Dhabi, we were fighting for the win, and there was 2 cars ahead who hadn't yet done their pit stops, and there was like 30 minutes to go or something, and we knew that they still had to do their pit stops, and after the pit stops, we would have come out either 1st or 2nd.
Yeah.
But just, I think 1 lap before they had to do their pit stops, a full course yellow came out, and they got a free pit stop. Because when everyone's doing 80 kph, they could box, do their pit stop, they didn't lose any time, relatively speaking, and could leave the pits again, still in the lead. And that cost us a win in race 3, but it also ended up costing us the championship. So that was a bummer from that perspective. But our target in Asian Le Mans was to finish in the top 3. So the following day, we started, I think, 5th. I did the starts of each race, and I came out 2nd. And then on the 3rd lap, someone hit me, like really bad, bent the exhausts up, and by some miracle, the car kept going, like real, like ACC or Gran Turismo Sport impact, and the car kept going. So Gran Turismo is a real simulator. And we were fighting for the win on that one as well, but didn't quite have the pace and also the strategy, the way that the full course yellows came around. We ended up finishing 3rd. That particular race, Davide Rigon did a phenomenal job. We finished 3rd because of him. And as a result of that, we finished 3rd in the championship, and the team earned an entry to the real Le Mans. So that was pretty cool, because that's what we went there to achieve. And it was unique because usually in GT racing, you only go racing if someone's paying for it. Someone like one of the drivers or combination of the drivers are paying for it. And in this case, Rinaldi himself, he decided to risk his own money to try and earn this Le Mans entry, which is very, very rare. Team owners don't do that because they don't make that much money from racing. Even though the budgets are huge, the margins are so tight. And he took the risk to try and earn that Le Mans seat or entry to hopefully sell it to a customer afterwards, which he managed to do. So that was really cool to be able to be part of that was awesome. And it was weird that it's March. Usually in March, I haven't driven a car now for 5 months, usually, and I've already done an entire championship. So it's a bit of a strange start to the year, but a good one.
Yeah. And do you have plans for the rest of the year?
Yeah. So I will be doing Le Mans for the first time ever. I can't tell you with who. It's not with Rinaldi. It's not with Kessel. But I will be doing Le Mans, which is really, 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 that's the only reason I came into racing when I was older, when I was 30. It was because of Le Mans. And finally, after like 6 years of literally ridiculous levels of sacrifice and effort for me, it's happening. I mean, look, who knows what could change between now and August? But at the moment, I am scheduled to do Le Mans. So you never know.
I sincerely hope you get there. Sorry, I'm not sure why that's happening. But no, it'd be fantastic to see you race at Le Mans. But on a slightly lighter note, I know that also you've been with us for nearly an hour, so I will round things up because I know you guys are very busy and have been very patient and very generous with your time. Are you going to do a big go-kart race? Now that there's quite a few of you at the SimGrid, are you going to have a bit of rivalry and start racing each other?
Definitely. When COVID ends, and lockdown ends rather, well, I won't organize it. Josh will have to organize it. But I'll be there.
To be fair, we've speaking volumes to what you were saying earlier, Hugh, about what I've learned from David and stuff. Part of that has been this company culture and remote working, and we've even been able to fit in a couple of staff nights of racing in ACC, haven't we? And maybe some toys were thrown out the pram at some points, but everyone enjoyed themselves, and it's one of the unique advantages of working in this industry is that you can do what you love with people that you enjoy being around. So it's awesome.
Yeah, that's
Nobody
cool.
got fired for dodgy moves or any penalties.
Close.
No
It
warning.
was a tense moment. Yes, it got awkward.
That tactic of don't take out the boss is
Exactly.
definitely.
Oh, no. You can ram me as much as you want. It's for fun.
And we've got a quick comment here from Alaric Olde-Onslin. For Josh, what's the road to sneaking into Le Mans and acting like you're French?
Well, that's a good question. Yeah, I don't know, mate. I don't know. If he works it out, let me know.
And definitely not a bird says, I'm ready to beat all of you. So it must be one of your staff. Is
that Jack, I reckon? Yeah, there you go.
Well, no, it's fantastic. Look, I really appreciate the both of you coming on the show tonight and talking about all the fantastic opportunities there at the SimGrid and what you've been doing for all us sim racers and fans. And it's really good. And send us the details for links for the SimGrid, and we will put it on in the description for the future for us as more viewers come along to watch the show. But are there any kind of last minute tips that the two of you would like to give to do well in the SimGrid? For all those eager sim racers that are watching, what's the keys to winning with the SimGrid Championships?
Practice, just practice, and the daily racing stuff is probably the best place because you can practice your racing there, and it's not a championship event that's going to cost you in the long term. So, if you have the time, you're welcome to join the SimGrid. It's for free, and drive as much as you want. And we'll appreciate your company.
Fantastic. And for Josh, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think you hit the nail on the head there. If you don't get the time to race, you can always check out the Coach Dave Academy blog. There's loads of great resource on there about even the basics of ACC where you can, get yourself some knowledge and maybe find something you enjoy. So check us out.
Fantastic. Well, for all you guys who've been watching from all over the world, I know we've got people from Australia and New Zealand and America and all over the world. It's great to have you all with us. And in fact, I realized that David said our catchphrase earlier on in the interview and probably didn't realize, but you said, win it at the first corner. And of course, that's our crazy scheme. Just how amateur we all are, or as I am, I won't speak for anybody else. For me, that was the one that happened. Says when my good colleague Jonathan was about to do his final racing test, and in order for him to complete his license and manage to be allowed to race, they had to do the debrief before the race, and the chief steward of Silverstone said, "Right, does everyone know what they're doing? And everyone happy? Or any questions?" And Jonathan said, "Yes, I'm going to win the race at the first corner." And he just put his hands over his head and went, "Oh, good grief!" So, but in all fairness, he didn't crash, and he did finish.
Did he win?
He finished third. In his first race.
Not bad.
Yeah, which is not bad. And then the second one, he got from 11th to 5th, I think it was, which was pretty good going on the kind of Stowe circuit at Silverstone. So that's where I took that comment from. But it's been an absolute pleasure to have you both on the show tonight. And with all the things you've been doing, wish you all the best for the year. And hopefully we can meet you again in person and some of the events that are coming up as COVID releases. It will be great to see you.
Thank you. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
You're very, very welcome. Thank you very much. And to all our viewers, you've been watching the Car, Sim and Race Driver Show with two of the stars of sim racing, David Perel and Josh Martin. Take care, stay on the line, and we'll see you all very soon. Drive fast and try not to crash. Bye just now.